As y'all have heard me say before, the most important part of planning any adventure are the snacks. And if you're looking for a delicious and nutritious snack that packs a real protein punch, crack into a good source of protein with tasty, healthy, wonderful pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving of wonderful pistachios contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value in that one serving. It's one of the highest protein nuts out there. And that's not all. Pistachios are also known for the fiber and better for you unsaturated fats, which may help keep you feeling fuller longer. Best part, wonderful pistachios come in a variety of flavors and sizes. Perfect for enjoying with your family and friends or taking them with you on your summer adventures for those snacks we're talking about. So whether you're dropping off the kiddos or running between meetings or about to climb a mountain, fuel up with a healthy and tasty snack. Wonderful Pistachios will be your new go-to. You can check them out at wonderfulpistachios.com and learn more about how these little green wonders can power up your day. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today we're talking to Kait Boyle. Kait is joining us from the mountains of Idaho, just on the other side of the Grand Tetons in Victor, Idaho. And what's so cool about Kait's story is her intro to bikepacking. We're going to be talking a lot about bikepacking, bike racing, and backcountry adventure bikepacking specifically, and how she's working really hard with another upcoming guest, Kurt Refsnyder, on bikepackingroots.org. They are all about helping lower the barrier to get into bikepacking because, it's a lot of money. It's the bike can be very expensive, the gear, but once you have it, it lasts a really long time. So getting into it is the hardest part. And another thing is route finding and knowing where to go and what to try. They're going to start planning, her and Kurt are actually planning a few free bikepacking adventures for anybody to join, like a couple days, a lot like my trips that are paddle trips, where you do a weekend, it's free, anybody can show up. Some food's included, you bring a little bit. If you don't have gear, we've got extra. They are doing that for bikepacking. More details to come, but follow along on her Instagram to learn more when those are happening. Really cool. And I love that. I love when folks who are experts, who are so accomplished like Kait, who have won tons of races, use their platform, use their knowledge to help others get into the sport. That's what this show is all about. So them understanding that it's a really cool conversation about shaping the sport, shaping the culture around the sport. And we're going to hear how Kait got into it, one, like I said, but also how her world, not just bikepacking, but everything, almost came to a crashing end, no pun intended, a vehicle accident she was in not that long ago, and what life has been like afterwards. A lot of our shows have featured very stark life changes. Sometimes that is the reason people get into the adventure sport that leads to the adventure that we talk about on the show. Other times it's the injury itself that is the subject, or what life is like afterwards. So Kait's going to tell us, how pre-rec Kait and post-rec Kait are different, what she's learned, and what kind of encouragement you can take with you in your journey. Really fascinating story. I loved this conversation. And you can follow Kait at Kait, Kait.Boyle on Instagram. Boyle is Boyle, or go to bikepackingroots.com or backcountry-mtb.com, as well as her own website, imkait.com, imkait.com. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Kait Boyle, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mason and everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I always ask this first, and I actually don't know the answer here. Where are you coming from today? And I know it's darker than here, and where's home for you if that's not home?
Yeah, well, I'm actually at home right now, which feels amazing because I have not spent very much time here in the last 3 months, and that is Victor, Idaho. which is on the west side of the Tetons. So if you've heard of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, that's about a half an hour right over Teton Pass to the east.
What brought you there? Or did you grow up there?
Well, that's kind of part of this bigger adventure story. I worked for Knowles, which is known as the National Outdoor Leadership School, for about 10 or 12 years. And I mean, 2010, I started coming up to the Teton Valley to work in their river whitewater rafting program and also in their winter program. And so those courses were based out of Driggs, which is just 8 miles north of Victor. And I'd come up here in the winter and the summer. Meanwhile, I was based in Prescott, Arizona, where I was working for Prescott College, teaching adventure education. And eventually, around when I quit my job in Prescott, my boyfriend was kind of nomadic, working for Knowles, mostly in the Idaho, Utah area. And we both worked here, and I wanted to move to the mountains. I already had community here. And so, yeah, I moved up here in the summer of 2018, planning on kind of trying that out, and then had a car accident here, which led to being very rooted here. And now 5 years later, like, this is very much home. We're trying to build a house. That'll be its own adventure.
Yeah, it is. I've never done that, but I hear there's a lot that goes into it. Okay, so I want to unpack a few things there. So, you left, you got to that area, fell in love with it, put some roots down, but were you into bikepacking by the time you were an environmental educator, or did you discover bikepacking once you were educating?
So I started working for Outward Bound in 2006 as a backpacking, mountaineering, rock climbing instructor. And that was while I was still in college. And then after college, I worked for a number of years. And it wasn't until I think 2010 that I got on a mountain bike for the first time. And that was because I broke my ankle rock climbing, as so many climbers do. And the bike was the first thing I could do outside. And that ankle surgery took it was a very long time until I'd be climbing. And so while I was out riding my bike, I was like, wow, you can go a lot further on a bike than on foot. And I learned about the Tour Divide and the Great Divide mountain bike route. Kurt Refsnyder was teaching at Prescott College at the time, and he had just moved there. And so it was kind of this local legend in Prescott because he had won the Tour Divide and he was a professional cyclist. And so I decided to ride the Great Divide route with my boyfriend at the time. And so I went and rode the Cook Valley Trail with just a backpack, which I don't recommend. And then the next spring, I rode the Great Divide route from south to north on my single speed. And that's how I got into backpacking. And that was 2012. So at that point, I've been riding for about 2 years.
Wow. I ended up doing the Tour Divide the following year, 2013.
Awesome.
And rocked my world.
Yeah, totally. Same. I just remember, I didn't race it. I wanted to see every inch of it. So I rode just during the day, but it was June. So the days were really long. And I had to be at work to work a outdoor ed course in July. And so I had a month. And so I was like, cool, I'm going to ride 100 miles a day, and took a day or two off. And just remember getting to the Canadian border and being like, wow, I just saw the entire country under my own power in a month. That is crazy. Or not the entire country, but the length.
And on a fairly difficult way.
Yeah, totally.
Not the most direct path you could have taken.
Not the most direct.
Wow. So, I'd say too, so you made a great point. You discovered cycling after climbing. That's one thing I've probably kept me personally away from really loving climbing is just being stuck to something for so long. And when you're on the bike, you're just used to going past things at a pretty decent clip. It's still slow enough that you can appreciate it like hiking or backpacking, but not so slow that you're stagnant, but not so fast like in a car and that you're separated from it in a way. It's that perfect medium. And I think a lot of people realize, wow, this feels better on my joints. I can carry a whole jar of peanut butter. I don't have to drill holes in my toothbrush to save weight. There's all these benefits. I'm a huge advocate. And then kayaking, which I've gotten into, is even more so. You can just throw entire bottles of wine in your kayak. It doesn't matter. So it's
Totally. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, and I think a career in all these different adventure sports that I was teaching professionally, I found the bike to just be this perfect hybrid of the pace that you can travel through a landscape. Like it's so digestible, but you can also see change. And then also that simplicity of like it just and it's similar to backpacking in this way where like you don't need a climbing partner or a ski partner. You don't need all the gear that goes into whitewater trips or the shuttle. Like you can just go ride from your house or you can just pack up pretty quickly and go for a trip. And that's I think what has continued. That's ultimately I think what led me to kind of a complete career shift to being somehow a like professional bike packer and backcountry mountain biker was just that becoming such a passion. And I still love to ski and travel down rivers because you get to go places that you don't on a bike. But yeah, the bike is just pretty incredible way to experience wild places and just other cultures.
oh, absolutely. If you want to stop, you just stop. Like it's that easy. You don't,
Yeah,
if you,
totally.
when I kind of got off the
Yeah.
bike, like in a car, you're like, oh, I need to pull off or, get a, there's a little more logistics. I got into car camping after bike packing through college. And I'm like, dang, this thing is a lot harder to hide than a bike. Bike I can just put right there in the woods. The truck, I just can't hide it anywhere. That's one of the challenges. And so I'd get that, the dreaded knock in the middle of the night way more often in the
Oh
car.
yeah.
But that's another benefit. I love this question because it's what you're known for might be a lot different than what internally is the most impactful. What would you say was one of the most impactful early experiences on your bike, whether it be one of the big adventures or a day on the bike that just really like Kait prior to Kait post this thing was the most different?
I mean, part of me wants to say that Great Divide route because it was that first long bikepacking trip.
It was the first one. Wow.
Totally. And the long, like I rode the Kokopelli in preparation. But I think really when I think about it, like as far as what led me to the path of racing and bikepacking and more backcountry focused riding, like it would actually be this trip that Kurt Refsnyder and I took to the Alps in 2014. And that would have been 2 years after I rode the Great Divide route. And I started teaching this geology through bikepacking course with Kurt. So that's how we had gotten to know each other through both teaching at Prescott College because he designed that course. And like at that point, Kurt had he had won the Tour Divide and the Arizona Trail Race like too many times to keep track of and it was just unreal, like the things that he had done on a bike that were hard. And I was still pretty new to it, but I wasn't new to like hard things. And so we went to Europe with the plan of traversing the Alps on single track. And we were riding like what were the bike packing bikes at the time. Like we were riding Salsa, El Mariachis, they were Thai, hardtails with 2x10 gearing and no droppers. Like that's what we rode in 2014, right? And we went self-supported and put together this route that was self-designed with like input from a handful of Europeans that we knew. And we set out from Nice, France, and rode for a month. And after a month, we finished in Zermatt, which is not all the way across the Alps, but it's 800 miles along our route. And we had climbed over 200,000 feet, which for context is like the elevation gain of the Great Divide route, which is 2,700 miles.
Mm-hmm.
But in the distance, that was just a little bit longer than the Colorado Trail. Or it would be equivalent to like 3.5 Colorado trails of climbing in the same distance. So we spent so much time on trail. I was not the mountain biker skill wise or even like mentally and fitness wise that I am now. And so for me, I think at that point, that was the hardest thing I had ever done, and mentally and physically, but it was also so eye opening because I remember like these moments when I was out there and being like, wow, I'm I'm not physically quite as strong as Kurt, but like I can do this and so can he. And if he can do this and I can do this, then what else can I do as a woman in like the ultra endurance bikepacking world. And I think that it just gave me this level of confidence to go pursue these other trips around the world and then also start racing. As I, at that point, hadn't considered racing. I was like, didn't feel very competitive, generally preferred just personal challenges. But I think that trip sparked that curiosity in my mind that led to being curious about what was possible for me personally, and also having the confidence when those challenges came down the road to be like, well, I did this other thing and that was really hard. And Kurt and I are like actually pretty equal in many ways. And if that's the case, then like I should believe in myself to tackle these other challenges like racing or bikepacking in a more foreign landscape, or starting a nonprofit, or
Yeah.
recovering from a car accident. Like all those like turned into this like, whoa, okay, like the mountains give us this context and perspective of like kind of the uncertainty and adversity that we can overcome.
I can do hard things.
Yeah, totally.
What were you competitive as, growing up before this? Raced at all in other ways, or did that really spark competitive nature in you?
I mean, I grew up running indoor track because I grew up in the Northeast where winters are dark and cold. So we have an indoor track season, and I ran the mile. And again, like I think for me, it was about like how good can I do? My highlight in indoor track was like I ran a sub 6 minute mile, and it didn't matter to me like what place I finished in doing that. Like I just had really all I wanted in high school competitively was to finish in under that time. And like the other girls out there were like inspiration and motivation. And then I also grew up competing horses. And again, it was just kind of like, what kind of performance can I put together? And so I think, I don't know where that came from. Like, I think my parents never really pushed the like, you have to win or to be successful. I think it was just more like, do your best. And that very much has translated into how I race bikes of like, and sometimes it's to a fault where I'm like, I don't really care if I'm getting dropped or like if a gap is growing. Like I don't have that drive to like beat the person in front of me. Like I just want to get the most out of myself. And in ultra racing, that turned in also wanting to like thinking that that could be something that would set a high bar for others to strive towards.
That high bar for you was winning, a lot of the
Yeah,
time. So
definitely.
it's like, whoa, okay, all right. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. All right, another question. We actually just interviewed Kurt. The episode isn't out yet. How is he as a professor? Because we didn't dive into that a whole lot in his story.
Oh, funny. Well, let's see. I never witnessed him teach in a classroom. Like at Prescott College, a lot of courses are field-based. And so I co-taught this geology through bikepacking course. And we had very distinct roles. My role was to facilitate and teach the adventure education curriculum. Like we were bikepacking with students.
Oh, wow.
And so I was responsible for risk management and the leadership of like the expedition element of it. And he traveled with his kind of geology curriculum and taught geology along the way. And I think students are the best gauge of how good an instructor is. And if that is the case, then it seems like he was a fantastic geology professor because he had so many students leave Prescott College inspired by Kurt and with the knowledge and skills to go into geology or earth sciences in a postgraduate way or just like into their work life and just like have continued to be lifelong learners. And like we have a number of former students who like since graduating have just like seems to have retained that love and curiosity for like how the landscapes are formed and like their history and like the content, which I think understanding that gives you context for what makes a place special.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether or not students retain like the technical specific like numbers of years or succession of landforms, like that curiosity and the skills to like figure out what has happened in a place, that's what they seem to walk away with, which is a pretty lifelong skill.
You get someone like that who's passionate about geology taking you somewhere. It unlocks this just endless depth of information and understanding. And yeah, the more you understand about a place, the more you're going to appreciate it. It might not be your number one passion, but for instance, baseball is often considered a boring sport. Get someone to explain the game within the game to you, and you'll say, I had no idea any of that was even going on the surface. I mean, get a biologist out to a tidal pool, or get someone, anything, any culture, any aspect of anything. If something isn't curious to you, but lots of people seem to enjoy it, it's probably just a level of understanding you don't have yet. And I guarantee doesn't look like much on the surface, but there's a lot going on. So what led to the decision to leave education? Or I wouldn't say you've left education, but to leave that role specifically. Was it wanting to move deeper into the mountains where you are now and do these experiences? What would you say led to that? Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Cold turkey is great on a sandwich, but it's not always the best approach when it comes to breaking habits. I'm not talking about any magic here. I'm talking about our newest sponsor, Fume. They took a look at a problem in a different way. Not everything in a bad habit is wrong. So instead of a crazy change, why not remove the bad out of the habit? Fume is an innovative, award-winning flavored air device that does just that. So instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. And instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. No batteries, no electricity. I've been using my Fume. It's a really cool handheld device that you put this little core in and you can breathe air, and it's just like similar. It's just something to do that can kind of distract you if you are used to having something else in your hand that that might not be as good for you. It's really cool. There's no gimmick. There's no trick to it. It's just a really cool tool that helps, breathe some flavored air in while you drive or while you're hanging out at the office. There's no smoke. There's no anything. If you know anybody in your life trying to break a bad habit, maybe Fume is going to be that answer for them. It's helped hundreds of thousands of people so far. And if you want to give it a shot and learn more, maybe you're still a little confused, head to tryfume.com/adventure and use the code ADVENTURE to save 10% off your order. That's tryfum.com/adventure. And use the code ADVENTURE to save an additional 10% off. Give it a shot. Thank you, Fume, for sponsoring the show. I am a proud user of Manscaped. They are the revolutionary hair trimmer that a lot of men use. And our friends over at Manscaped have been working night and day to bring you below-the-waist grooming experience like none other with their brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It's the next generation of trimmer with interchangeable blade heads for whatever shave your mind can imagine. Is it the biggest technological advancement of all time? I think it is. And that's why you need to get it and upgrade your grooming game to the Ultra Sphere this year by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code ADVENTURE at checkout. You can take it on the go. This puppy comes with a travel case, travel lock feature to avoid accidentally powering on or off. It's actually really handy. One of my headlamps just died the other night because it turned on by itself in my backpack. And speaking of lights, it has dual LED spotlights just like your regular lawnmower. So like I said, get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ADVENTURE at manscaped.com. It's very high tech for very low places. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
It was a number of things, as many big life decisions formed based on like a number of different things coming to head. One was that this point in 2017 and 2018, like I had been based in Prescott since I was an undergraduate student. And so it'd been like 12 years there. And like I went there for college and then I kind of stayed for the community and the teaching and opportunity. And I just really missed winter and big mountains. And so I think part of me just like wanted a change of scenery. Like I had that feeling of like, there's so much that's great that's going on here. I could see myself in this job and in this place forever. And like, I'm always going to wonder, like, what would have happened if I did this? And I think that question, when I've been in that place, like not exploring it, has just led to not feeling quite satisfied. And exploring that, at least you get an answer, even if it doesn't work out. And I was like 31 or 30 or something. So like not very much to lose by like moving and trying something different. Another with the teaching part was just like I was working full time for Prescott College. That looked like teaching 6 to 7 field courses a year, which looked like one full semester being completely in the field. And that's like away from town, like on multiple week to 3 week long trips all semester with pretty quick transitions in between. And then in the spring or the other semester, I'd teach out of 4 of those. And so it was just a lot of field time, and it's hard to kind of pursue any of your own life in that, whether it's a relationship or just like feeling grounded in your community or bike racing. And so I was doing that while also working on a master's degree and also starting to race at a professional level. And it was just too much. Like when I look back on it now, I'm like, I don't know how I did that. And I know that like people who are parents and in school at the same time and hold full-time jobs, that's probably harder. But I think that I have like the next level
Yeah.
down of like full-time field work, master's program, and racing ultra races professionally, where you're like exhausted and they take a lot of time.
Yeah, I was going to say they're not like, 6-hour events. They're
Yeah,
multi-day.
totally. And like at that point, Kurt and I had the concept of bikepacking routes, and we're trying to get that off the ground as a nonprofit as well. And so it just felt like it was time for me to try to do fewer things and do them better. And I'd been teaching in the field for so long, and I was like, I can come back to this if I want to. And I think a break, I will be a better instructor. Like I was starting to feel burnt out. I will be a better instructor if I come back more fresh. And I'm curious what would happen if I tried to make the not even bike racing, but just bikes more of a professional endeavor for me and try to do my best to contribute to Bikepacking Roots becoming a successful nonprofit. And my plan was to work more contract-based field courses along the way because, like, at that point, I wasn't making very much money through sponsorship. So I was like, well, I'll keep working in the field. But then I was in the car accident, and that completely changed things.
As it tends to do. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah.
I want to dive into that. But I do want to ask first, can you tell us
Totally.
what is Bikepacking Roots? Like what is the mission there? And because that preceded this at least starting it preceded the car accident.
Yeah, totally. So Bikepacking Roots is a 501c3 nonprofit that Kurt Refsnyder and I founded with a initial founding board of about 6 board members. We launched in 2017. So I guess this is year 6 of being officially a nonprofit. Our mission is to support and advance bikepacking, the growth of a diverse bikepacking community, and access to and the conservation of the landscapes and public lands through which we ride.
I love it.
And that's more or less word for word been what our mission has been since we launched. That's kind of threefold as far as how we do that. We design routes that are well researched, intentional, and sustainable, with the goal of those routes setting bikepackers up for incredible life-changing experiences through bikepacking. We try to lower the barriers to bikepacking through building intentional community, providing a lot of educational resources, and through a blossoming grants program for the BIPOC Bike Adventure Grant. I think bikepacking is so young. When we started Bikepacking Roots just like 6 or 7 years ago, bikepacking as a sport was in a different place than it is now. Like it has grown exponentially in a very short amount of time. And if you zoom out even a little bit more, just in the last 10 years, like 10 years ago, maybe we could stretch it to 12. Like there's one website dedicated to bikepacking.
Yeah. Bikepacking.com.
.net.
Or .net.
Before, before bikepacking.com. And then bikepacking.com launched, and the Bikepackers magazine, which merged then with bikepacking.com later. And initially, before those websites were really a lot more established, like people were finding bikepacking through the races or through road touring and the Adventure Cycling Association. And we just thought that there was a lot of opportunity to expand how people find bikepacking and get into it and feel a part of the community. And that would actually also reflect kind of the ethos that people carry as bike packers. Like, we thought that there was a lot of opportunity for people to approach bike packing as a way to connect to the landscape and to connect to the communities that they're riding through, and like ultimately become stewards of those places and allies of those communities, rather than necessarily just like someone who's quickly passing through us and their goal to get to a finish line.
Did you see it going that direction, or did you see it maybe having the potential to?
More the potential to, like, there were a couple instances that really got us first talking about what led to the idea of bikepacking routes. And one of those was this race in Oregon. Now I'm completely blanking on the name of what that race was, but there were just these reports afterwards of people like sleeping, bikepacking racers sleeping in these private barns of farmers, like without permission, and then like pooping in them, and like leaving trash like in at gas stations and grocery stores, just like out where they were resupplying. Like, it was just that, like, I am here to go as fast as possible. It doesn't matter. Rules don't apply to me, or like being a steward doesn't apply to me because of this, like bigger goal. That was just one instance. But I think through that, we're like, wow, like, what about trying to promote traveling with the goal of like being a part of this landscape in a positive way, and like being the sort of person, and like bike packers being the sort of user group that land managers are like, oh, I ran into someone bike packing.
Yeah,
They're awesome.
I want them on my land.
Totally. Cause like I think we were seeing bikepacking routes being published, routes being published that cross private land, and these races have a history of being very grassroots and underground and unpermitted, which can be legal, and then depending on how it's orchestrated can also be technically illegal. And so we were just like, this is growing. The more people are doing this, the more important it is that they're just doing it in a way that like landowners, land managers, community members are all seeing bikepacking as like a really positive thing for their communities, so that ultimately, like, and now we're in this place. So that's what's crazy, is that there are towns and communities who want to bring bikepacking there because it has become such a positive thing for tourism. And that's awesome. And I would not attribute that solely to bikepacking routes, but I think we've had a small part in it.
Sports, we can point to a number of sports where culturally they have shifted to where there's not a lot of people don't love them coming into their space
Right.
necessarily. And it would be tragic if that happened to bikepacking. And so, yeah, y'all setting the tone and kind of setting, hey, here's what a bike packer here's some values that we need to carry into any space. Personally, I find myself, and I talk about it a lot in the show, anywhere I adventure now, which is mostly paddling, pedal and paddle, I can't help but like think about how this land come to be in the sense of being protected, because a lot of adventures happen on protected land through national parks, state parks, national forests, whatever it is, usually some sort of conservation area. Those don't just happen. So how do we use these sports we love to make sure these places exist? So I love that it's a connection and protection to the land. Why do you value that? Did you start seeing that? Because we still run into plenty of adventurers that don't give a damn about that side of things. What about it to you? Did it start to click for you? Like, not only are you having these awesome experiences, but like, whoa, these kinds of places don't just happen. It takes people intentionally doing this work.
The way I got there doesn't necessarily look like how I'm trying to facilitate people to get there through bikepacking routes or through my own mission, but it just happened mostly through teaching adventure education and spending so much time in those public lands. Like, that is, at least especially in the Western US, like if you're going out on on trails, rivers, into the mountains, across deserts, like, you're most likely traveling and recreating on federally managed public land. I know in the East, there's a lot more state managed lands, and even just like public or private landowners granting access and easements because they recognize the value of those opportunities and are hopefully rewarded through tax deductions. But understanding just that, like, those experiences that I was having that had not only shaped so much of like my adult life experiences, but also just like where I was spending my time. Like and ended up teaching probably a little over 200 weeks in the field. And that's like 200 weeks of like sleeping on the ground on federally managed public lands primarily. And that's what afforded me so many of the, like character building opportunities and development of a variety of different skills, from technical skills to human skills to leadership skills, like to educational skills. Like that all happened for me out there. And then like every race that I was participating in was happening on public lands, and like what came from those races, whether it was again those like intrinsic values and experiences to the extrinsic of like I have a job. Or like these are where my best friendships were formed, or like my husband I met working on a salmon river course, like
Yeah.
in one of the largest wilderness areas in the United States. And like just having that awareness through one, having to know in the first place, like just what land you're on and who manages it. And then also a bit more of the context of that. Like I think something that I've been thinking a lot of more about in maybe the last like 5 or 6 years is like the context of how federal land came to be, and how that's mostly unceded territory from indigenous people, and like what is the way forward for us in 2023. Because like we have a system now that is formed on like some fundamentally broken and principles. And so what are ways that we can move forward to like ultimately as humanity be stewards of this landscape that like provides us clean air and clean water, which is necessary for all humans, but then also these amazing adventure experiences. And I don't necessarily have the right answer except to like continue to support land management for the preservation of those things, and including indigenous leadership in the decision making. And so that's my personal stance now. But yeah, that I think just that piece of like knowing where you are and why it is that way. Like it's such a basic question, but it's sometimes really easy to not know or to just ignore. Because like in a way, public lands are so accessible that it's can be really easy to just like take it for granted. Like you might see like a sign that's like entering the Bridger Teton National Forest, and like it's on the side of the road, and like there's no gate, you don't have to pay. And that's part of what makes it amazing. But it's mostly like the national parks and state parks that people associate with being protected, because you actually have to stop and pay someone.
Well, ideally, sometimes bikepackers sometimes don't. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, and that's like part of the thing that we were like,
trying to do.
Cool, we need like bikepackers to like be the people that rangers aren't just like, I saw a bikepacker, they're doing something wrong.
Yes, that's just, always keep your eye out for those bikepackers.
Right.
They're pooping in barns all over the place. They aim for them. No,
whoever did that, they've been talked about.
Smells like a bikepacker. No, I encourage anyone, whatever land you love, find out how it came to be, because I guarantee more often than not, there's a very interesting story there where the land, by the skin of its teeth, became protected, as far as through conservation in our current government system. Yes, it was probably stolen at some point too, but the reason it is not, covered in pavement or covered in a mining operation is oftentimes someone who cared about it, the owner wanting a legacy and saying, my parents are buried on this land. You know what I mean? I can't let it become this other thing. Or oftentimes it's through just someone taking some sort of action in some way. And so it's great that we are able to enjoy places like national parks and whatnot, but there's so much of it that's still on the chopping block that I encourage people, when you realize how some of this comes to be, you can start to see, oh, wow, the rest of this land that isn't necessarily protected could be, if I take action, if I do something, if I start talking about it even and start using it, if it's accessible, that is. And so, I don't know, I just encourage people, this stuff doesn't just come to be. It is usually a community and a person and people fighting something, or it gets on the chopping block, gets put in the spotlight, and it can go one way or the other. And it ends up sometimes going the right way.
Totally. I think just being tapped into what's going on, like our government in the US is like very large and can be very hard to navigate, like decisions that are being made. But if we want to continue to have the experiences we're having, like we have to be paying attention. And that is one of the things that at Bikepacking Roots we're trying to do, is to just like help people sift through like all the noise of day-to-day news, and to be able to be like, hey, like here's an issue. This could impact you as a bike packer. Like here's how you could participate. And at least that way, like if something you care about is bike packing, then we're trying to help make a difference for how you're able to use your voice to continue to make these experiences possible. And if you're a climber or a paddler or a backcountry skier, like there are organizations out there for all those sports who are those kind of watchdogs in a way, and helping you understand how you can help advocate for that type of recreation. And that was one of the things with Bikepacking Roots, was like there wasn't an organization dedicated to that for bikepacking yet. We have IMBA for mountain biking, People on Bikes for just like bike advocacy. They do a ton of amazing legislative work, and Adventure Cycling Association for road touring. And so Bikepacking Roots was that kind of final, well, maybe not final, but next link.
Yeah, absolutely. Link in the
final.
chain. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
I'll tell people too, when it comes to that stuff, like you're saying, things being complex. I think Steve Jobs said it, like the world is more or less run by people as smart as you and me. Like it's not, I mean, there's geniuses for sure out there, and there's people with terrible intentions, but more or less the people in charge are just like you and me.
That is a really good point.
And, the more I dive into anything, the more I realize, holy cow, that, there's one decision maker here or three, and they're all humans. They all have motivations, they all have emotions, they all have things they care about outside of this. So when you start to realize that, it becomes less scary. And two, the world is changed by people that show up. The person that doesn't send that email never gets heard. The person that doesn't go to that meeting. And you would be very surprised by how few people do show up to things you think people do, and how much just sharing your opinion can actually change things. I've seen it firsthand recently.
Yeah, it's like participation is actually most of it.
Yeah.
And the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Mm-hmm. And that's like with land managers, it's so true. Like you can't pay land managers to listen to you, but you can be like right in their ear. And then organizations that are well funded are able to put more people out there to be more of squeaky wheels. So
yeah, I did not see our conversation jumping in all this. This is very exciting. I'm great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the listeners are probably like get back to the adventure, but no, this is all part of it. I do want to ask, what happened with the accident? Are we able to dive into that?
Totally.
Just because that's like the thing that brings the real world in life, no pun intended, crashing back in is boom, this happens. What happened? Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible.
The best travel gear isn't born in a factory. It's inspired by journeys taken by real people exploring the world. That's why I love Rourke. Their team pulls designs and inspiration straight from the places they travel and have adventures. And for over 10 years, they've been exploring the globe to seek adventures on the road less traveled. Everything from surfing waves on remote island chains to exploring the streets of Jakarta, the Scottish Highlands, and almost everything in between. Rourke has developed options for you. I'm actually wearing the Rourke Bless Up breathable stretch shirt right now, and I was wearing a Rourke shirt yesterday. I'm traveling right now, and you could probably hear the echo in the room, but I was at this event. This guy was speaking, and he looked down at me and pointed at me right in the middle of his talk and said, "Nice shirt." And I was like, "Thank you very much." It was a Rourke shirt, and I've got my Accomplice Mule 45-liter bag. I love it because it can hold all my podcast gear, take it on the plane, but also holds extra stuff. I can put some clothes in there too. And if I didn't have my podcast gear, it could probably hold everything I needed for this trip. And it's water resistant. I love that. So Rourke offers durable, comfortable styles inspired by the places they've been. And they've got their latest collection, the Hokkaido, featuring Japanese prints and patterns and Japanese manufactured Kaihara premium denim. So if you're traveling, Rourke has the gear options. And for a limited time, if you're a listener of the show, you can get 15% off your first order. Go to Rourke.com. Use the code ASP15 at checkout. That's ROARK.com and use the code ASP15 for 15% off your first order.
This episode is brought to us by Oris Watches. You know what piece of equipment on any adventure that I'm honestly surprised by how much I use is my watch. And I'm wearing a watch right now. I always have a watch on. And I believe that you should check out Oris Watches. Oris is a 119-year-old family-owned independent watch brand based out of Holstein, Switzerland. The brand has been certified climate and carbon neutral since 2021 and every year releases a sustainability report. Oris only makes mechanical watches like the new Pro Pilot X Caliber 400 and the new Pro Pilot Altimeter featuring a 3D printed carbon case. If you're a fan of mechanical watches like I am, there's nothing in the game that's better than Oris, and you can discover the full Oris collection at a retailer near you or at oris.ch. So if you want that one piece of equipment in your life to be functional, to be useful, to be beautiful, artistic, check out Oris Watches. Oris, go your own way. Are you a busy person with lots of passions and lots of responsibilities and very little time like me? Well, you might be a fan of Green Chef. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating clean, dinners that work for you. They deliver everything you need to eat great the easy way this October. Feel your best with nutrition-approved recipes delivered right to your door. Easy to prep meals, all the ingredients you need, and pretty good-sized portions too. You know, I'm a big guy. I'm like 6'4", 220 on a good day. And, you know, I'm always worried, oh man, is this going to be enough food for me? Because I can put it down. Well, Green Chef, man, I believe it or not, my family of 4 had leftovers afterwards. Now, granted, the kids are small, but I more than make up for what they don't eat. And we had leftovers. It felt good. I didn't feel sluggish. I didn't feel like I put too much butter or salt or anything on it. It was clean eating, especially this time of year. Things get crazy. Maybe the weather's turning in your area, and it's just tough. It's just tough to grocery shop. Man, that's one of my least favorite things to do. I'm thankful we can grocery shop, but Green Chef made it easy, delivered it right to my door to make a home-cooked, nutritious meal for my family. So if you want to give Green Chef a shot, go to greenchef.com/60ASP and use the code 60ASP to get 60% off plus free shipping. That's an insane deal. 60% off. Again, that's greenchef.com/ASP60 and use the code ASP60 for 60% off and free shipping. The link's in the show notes. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
At the end of 2017, I decided to quit my job at Prescott College. I was right about to finish my thesis for my master's, and I was moving to the Tetons in the summer of 2018. And I had pretty big goals on the bike. My plan was to win and set a record at the 24 Hours of Old Pueblo, which is a race I had won, but had been trying to set a record for a number of years and had kept coming up short. To win and set a record in the Arizona Trail 300 race, which again, I had won, and been trying to set the record a number of times and it continued to come up short. Those were kind of my 2 race goals. And I managed, both of those races are in the winter and spring. That's a great time of year to ride in Arizona. And so I achieved that at Old Pueblo. I raced and did 18 laps, which is about 300 miles in 24 hours on your mountain bike, and set a course record in doing that. About 8 weeks later, I set a record in the Arizona Trail 300, which took 11 hours off the women's record. And my time was just 2 hours behind the 3 fastest men's times ever.
Wow.
And I was the 4th fastest time. And which, like, 2 hours in a 51-hour race is like, it feels like minutes, you know, you're like, oh, I can do better. I know how to take those 2 hours off after you do that. Because the cool thing about racing is like, you don't really get perfect races. Like over that amount of time, it's really easy to keep finding ways to get better.
Everybody's had a few things that didn't go right.
Totally.
Even the FKT.
Yeah, and they add up. And that's what's cool, you know, and I think the other cool thing about these races is like we're all human and like none of us are superhuman. I don't believe I'm any particularly I don't believe I'm especially gifted. I don't believe Kurt is especially gifted.
Well,
I don't believe
yeah.
Lael Wilcox is especially gifted, and we're friends, and I can say that. Like, I think that we just have had the opportunity, like the privilege to try really hard and then have like figured out what we need to do to get the best out of ourselves.
I'll tell Lael because she's supposed to come on soon. So Kait Boyle said you're not particularly gifted. What do you have to say about that?
She's amazing, and she's very
No, I'm just kidding.
strong.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
Head,
you're right.
in her body, but what I'm saying is that like these times that we have put out there, like other people can do them, and they should be inspiration, not intimidation. You know, through Old Pueblo, I got invited to go race to the 24-hour World Championships because Old Pueblo is basically like it's just the biggest 24-hour race in North America. And so that was kind of my performance there, put me on the radar for the World Championships organizer. And so I was invited over to Scotland and went over and raced in Scotland in October of 2018. And I won that race, which the cool thing was that was one part physical, but it was hugely just mental and tactical because it was 50 degrees and raining the entire time. And to perform well in like arguably some of the shittiest conditions. I mean, that's just like when you get hypothermic. It was like maybe like 40 to 50 degrees. It's just like self-care. And that's a lot of what adventuring in the mountains is. And so I did that at the end of October. And after this incredible year, like a year that you would never expect to be able to have, having met all these goals and just kind of like launching myself into this next level as far as racing goes, I was like ready to go, set an overall record in the Arizona Trail 300, ready to go.
Yep.
Set an overall record in the Colorado Trail race. I was like, okay, I am going to be able to be the one with Lael who's like showing the world that like women are as strong as men in ultra racing. I was spending the winter some of the winter up in the Tetons to make some money working in the field. And on Christmas Eve, I was just leaving the grocery store to drive down to the house the cat I was taking care of for a friend. And as I was driving along, the back two wheels of my truck slid out on black ice, and I just lost control of my truck at about 40 miles an hour and was just fishtailing through the road. And as I was correcting it and sliding back into my lane, the oncoming car, which had swerved to initially avoid my trajectory, just T-boned me in my driver's side door at about 50 miles an hour. And I came to a stop and realized that, well, I was fully conscious, but I realized that I could not feel anything from my waist down, which is a telltale sign of being paralyzed. And so in that moment, I was like, whoa, I have two options right now. One is to freak out because I could be paralyzed and I'm in a lot of pain. And this is really scary. And the other option is to do everything that I've learned through bikepacking and ultra racing, like in challenging moments in the face of adversity. And that's just to like focus on my breath and to just focus on what I can control. And in that moment in the truck, the only thing I could control was breathing. I was like, oh, I'm breathing. And if I get out of this truck and learn that I'm ever going to be able to walk again, let alone ride a bike, let alone race a bike, like I am going to make sure that the rest of the days that I do live, like doing those things are just with the intent of having the most positive impact that I can have and to never take the opportunity to move outside in wild places for granted.
Were you thinking all that right then?
Yeah, no, in that moment I was like, that is my commitment. And like I had to think about something because I was stuck in my truck for 4 hours and then they had to like use the jaws of life to get me out. And I went to...
And you were conscious?
I was conscious.
Couldn't move?
Could not move, like was frozen still. I was, the the steering console was crushed up against my knees. And so I was like truly just stuck. And like with the injuries that I had, I just was not able to move anything. My arms were fine, so I could like move those. But I was able to get like a paramedic crawled through the broken window. She was very small. She was like my 5'2", my size. And she crawled through the broken window and sat on the bench seat with me and like hooked me up to morphine until they could like tear the truck apart around me to get me out. And I went to the hospital that night, and this is Christmas Eve. You know, you're like, oh my God. And my family was in the Northeast, and my boyfriend Will was in the Southeast with his family. And I was going to go to a potluck with some friends. And I just was like, and my phone had just like flown out the window. And the crazy thing through all of this, I think one of the craziest things that night was that when my truck came to a stop, there were people who were behind us who had stopped and like ran onto the scene to help. And the first two were two of my former Prescott College students who were both wilderness first aid responders.
Whoa.
And had no idea that it was me. They didn't know the truck I was in at that point. They were visiting. Like, I didn't know they didn't live there. They were just like passing through, had skied at Targhee, and were like going over to Jackson for Christmas dinner with some family. And they're the first ones to come up to me to see if I was alive.
That is crazy.
It was crazy. Like, it gives me chills.
You're like, am I in heaven or something?
Totally.
Like,
No, that was the moment where it's like, did I hurt my head? I think I'm done.
Yeah.
It's been real. That's not Alex and Julie. But it was.
Oh my gosh.
And so then I was taken to the hospital in Driggs, which then pretty quickly they're like, oh, you're really hurt. You need to go to the trauma center over in Idaho Falls, but you know, it's snowing too much to helicopter you over. So you're going in the ambulance, and it just took what felt like forever. But at some point late on Christmas Eve, I learned that I had a shattered pelvis and sacrum, and a ruptured bladder. And the ruptured bladder was a kind of big deal because it's an organ.
Yeah.
When you have like urine moving through your body, there's a lot of risk for infection. And so they did an emergency surgery on my abdomen that night to fix the bladder. Ironically, they didn't actually have to do anything to the bladder, but they cut me open, and the trauma surgeon was very proud of himself when he told me this the next day. He's like, I took out every organ and checked it for you. I'm like, oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
He pulled it out.
I've
held
never
it,
heard
like
that.
how they do it. But I got stitched back up, and then the next day on Christmas Day, my parents arrived and my boyfriend arrived, and my orthopedic surgeon, I met him for the first time, Lance, and he was like, great news, you're going to have a full recovery. We have a plan for how we're going to like heal your pelvis and your sacrum. By the way, you have a broken fibula too, but that's not a big deal. And it's just going to take some time. And so I ended up having surgery about 3 or 4 days later. They just wanted time for like the urine to clean out to reduce the risk of bone infection. And I got an external fixator, which looks like a towel rack being screwed into the outside of your pelvis, but it goes like through your skin into your bones, to clamp everything together. Because if you think of a circle that's broken in 4 places, like how do you keep that healing in the right position? And that's like my pelvic ring. And so that was just clamped by this external fixator. And then I got 2 long screws that are, I don't know, 4 inches long that went through my sacrum, and those are still there today.
Jeez.
But the external fixator I had for 12 weeks, and I was in a wheelchair for about half of that, and the bladder healed. And the amazing thing is I was able to get on a bike with the external fixator on a trainer and just like turn my legs in circle. And my surgeon, Lance, was like, sure, you can do that if you want. No one's ever wanted to do that, but if you can tolerate it, you can do that. And I honestly believe that doing that, like the bike is actually like sitting on a stationary bike on a trainer inside a house and just turning my legs at like 0 watts. But while otherwise being stuck in a sitting or laying down on my back position in a wheelchair is what led to such a successful recovery, because it was the only way to get blood moving through my body. And then it also fed that mental element of like, wow, I'm like I'm on my bike. If I can
Yeah.
do this with an external fixator and a broken pelvis, like I can, or peeling pelvis, like I'm going to be able to ride outside again.
I mean, you were confident in that even at that time. When were you able to express that confidence?
Mm, I mean, I think pretty quickly, like my surgeon was amazing. I think I presented a new challenge for him. And because I think most people who have broken pelvises, or at least he told me, most people who have broken pelvises in Idaho Falls are in like farming accidents or like motorized sports accidents, like dirt bikes. One of the first things I asked him on Christmas Day was like, I want to go win the 24-hour world championships again. Can I do that? And he was like, I don't see why not. And he was like, yeah, seriously. And he's like, you're going to have, like, your body will be different and you're going to have like connective tissue around your pelvis that's always going to feel a little different. And that could be a problem for you. But he was like, yeah, I don't see why not. And so he gave me this confidence. And then my physical therapist, Kelly, is amazing. And I just happened to end up in the hands of one of the few physical therapists who's double board certified in orthopedics and pelvic floor health. And I didn't even know that pelvic floor health was something to be certified in.
How do you
I had no idea. And I
that?
didn't even really know that until like
How do you
months
aim for
after I
that?
worked with her. I just got wheeled into her office. Like it was just one of those things in the world. I was like, cool, Kelly is going to be one of your guardian angels. And she's still, I mean, I texted her like 2 days ago. I just ended up with this team who gave me the ability to believe those things. And there are no promises, but it was just like, yeah, I don't see why not. Like, it's going to take a lot of work. And so it was like, cool, I know how to work hard. And I was lucky enough to have the support of people who are really good at their jobs and were on board to like believe with me.
All the thoughts that you had when you were sitting in the truck waiting for the jaws of life to get you out, did those thoughts and those resolutions stick?
Yeah, that first one of like, wow, like I can only control the controllable. That right now, that's my breath. And this, like, I was so close to having the ability to move freely with a fully able body taken away from me. And so to spend like, I mean, it wasn't even 24 hours, maybe like 12 hours wondering if I was paralyzed and if I'd ever be able to walk again, like it kind of sticks with you. Like I feel like I got by with some sort of like Pasco for free card. And doctors now, like I still like my body will never be the same. And so I still do things on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis that involves working with medical professionals in order to keep my body post-car accident able to operate at a really high level. And they love to remind me, they're like, wow, you really are lucky you didn't die. Most people would like that usually leads to dying. And so like I'm continually reminded of how serious that car accident was and how lucky I was that it was just my pelvis and that I had such a good surgeon and such amazing physical therapist. And this is another case just for exercising, but like I was so strong and fit when I got in that car accident. And they think that had a lot to do with why I healed so well and so quickly. Like, I mean, for how serious my injuries were, like the fact that I was back on a bike and riding outside like 14 weeks afterwards, like on pavement, very controlled environment, but like I was doing it, it was pretty phenomenal to people. And so I think it's just that at times I, can be in like a normal head state base of like, oh, this is just like going out for a ride, like it's work, and then, but it's so easy to snap out of that and be like, wow, I'm so lucky. Like, I can't believe I still get to do this, and just feeling inspired and like really anchored to feeling like I have a commitment to like do the most with that.
Do you have to fight bitterness?
For me, it's not bitterness. I think sometimes I feel like sometimes it's easy to feel disappointed or sad. Like, so I ultimately, after the car accident, went and raced the Kokopelli Trail, which is 130 miles, and set a fastest known time on that, which took about 13 hours. And that to me, that was like the first like ultra back. And I was like, okay, I'm on track to racing these longer races. And then last year, this is partly slowed because of the pandemic, but last year I went back to 24-hour worlds for the first time. And after 12 hours, for some reason, I could not stand on my right leg. Like there was just this shooting pain and I could not walk, let alone ride. And my physical therapist, Kelly, was there with me in Italy. And she went through everything. She's like, you're not getting back on your bike. Like this is not good for your body. And I knew it, I just needed someone to tell me and say it out loud. And my husband was there, who was the boyfriend in the initial part of the car accident. And he was like, I want to be able to ski and bike with you when we're 70. Like, this isn't worth it. And so I have ultimately retired from ultra racing, which has created space for new ways to focus my energy outside. And that's where, when there was when a trail race starts, like last week, it's easy to look at track leaders and be like, oh, I wish I was there. What could I be doing, if I was there? But at the same time, I think I have the moment of like, oh, I miss that. Like, I need to remember that there's so much you can do with your body outside and whatever it's capable of, that focusing on what I can do and what I do get to do is a lot more powerful than like what I can't do.
It's a great perspective. Gosh, we probably should wrap up here in just a few minutes. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
How do you think this makes you better as a human? Besides all the perspective shifting, it sounds like, because I'll say, a lot of the stories we've interviewed people for on this show, the reason they did that thing was because they had an injury that changed their trajectory, maybe 10 years ago, I remember one, I think the first woman to paddle the Nile River source to see we had on, that she was equestrian fanatic and fell off a horse, broke her back, but for some reason paddling was okay. And she's like, I would have never done this had that injury not happened. Do you see your future that way? Like it's, I'm never there's all this stuff I'm going to do that I never would have done had I not been in an accident.
That's an really interesting question. Like on one hand, yes, as far as biking goes, I think that has led to just much more of a focus on the place and less of a focus on the performance. Like I can still race at perform at a high level, but I think what I've realized is like that is so special, and like in reflecting, like in those days in the hospital, like what have been the most meaningful experiences, they've always been in wild places and in big landscapes. And so just being able to go there feels more like what is motivating me now, rather than being able to be the best in the world at something. Like I'm not trying to be the best in the world in anything now. And there's a pretty big sense, there's kind of a lot of pressure taken off from that. And part of that, and that is connected to this other element that might not be maybe what you're expecting, but like, I think, at least for me, like to be the best at something, like there's kind of a type A personality of like very focused and very driven. And the car accident, while I had to be certainly focused and driven to heal, like it forced me to really slow down, like, and like literally stop. Like I had a number of weeks in a wheelchair where it was like I was not moving anywhere. And doing that like in the winter when it was like snowing every day and was very limited by where I could go, in part because of the weather and the other part being the wheelchair, and just like having that time healing with Will and with my mom, like, and then being supported and like lifted up by the community here, that has changed how I just kind of view like relationships and community. Because like the landscape is one thing, but a lot of how we draw value as humans, I think, is like we are social people. And so it's like the connections to the people that we share those experiences with, I think very much strengthens our sense of self and our connection to ourself in those wild, non-human places. And so I think post accident, like I think a lot about like how to fill my cup and keep my soul burning with like adventures outside. But there's a huge part now too of my time and energy that's dedicated to like just really appreciating the people in my life and the place that I get to call home. And that's like the community of where I live in Victor, but then also the community that I left in Prescott. And like, because ultimately when things are hard, those are the people who will show up and support you, and that you get to support it and like in their challenges. And I think that's like a pretty big revelation for me. It's just like that ability to like slow down and rest and like be still and be in one place and really and focus on people, relationships, and community.
You don't have to be forced in that situation, being pinned to a steering column and former students coming up to you and being like, "Oh my gosh, haven't seen you in a while."
I probably was like, "How are you?
How are you?" I'm okay. I was okay until this, but we'll see about the future.
Can you call my mom?
And tell her, the most heartfelt thing I've ever told anybody. Yeah, that's what a crazy circumstance. Well, Kait, I'm really excited to see, how this continues to shape you and how you continue to shape this sport that, has been probably a big reason I'm talking to you right now, is why I got in an adventure in the first place, is on a bike. And I'm excited to see what y'all do and how you're doing it. And where would you like to point folks? Would it be either following you or bikepackingroutes.org? What would be the most important message you want to leave people with?
If they want to keep up with me, they can follow me on Instagram, or I have a newsletter that I send out, which you can sign up through my website, which is imkait.com. Or with Bikepacking Routes and the work we're doing for bikepacking, we have a new ED as of this spring, Noelle. She is amazing and is really just like taking Bikepacking Routes by the reins and very quickly expanding our reach and our capacity. It's pretty inspiring to watch. And so you can keep up with us over at Bikepacking Routes, which is ROOTS.org. Being a member is free and helps us in numbers. And we also have annual membership drives, because financially supporting members do make a lot of our work possible. And you can also keep up with Bikepacking Routes on Instagram, which is just Bikepacking Routes.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.